Gouverneur Morris was a New York aristocrat and brilliant statesman who became the penman of the Constitution. Gouverneur Morris, one of the most influential founding fathers, was born in Morrisania, New York on January 31, 1752. He came from one of the wealthiest families in colonial America. He had a commanding presence and sharp intellect. Morris's family estate was vast, stretching across thousands of acres in what is now the Bronx. He was educated by private tutors and attended King's College, now Columbia University, graduating at the age of 16. He then studied law and was admitted to the bar in 1771. The young Morris quickly established himself as one of the most promising legal minds in New York. His wit was legendary, his arguments were devastating, and his ambition was boundless. Gouverneur Morris was a man of contradictions. He lived a life of privilege that he had no intention of surrendering. When the revolution came, Morris had everything to lose. His family was divided in their loyalties. His mother remained a staunch loyalist throughout the war. His half-brother served as a general in the British Army. But Gouverneur Morris chose the patriot cause, though he was never a radical. He was skeptical of democracy, fearful of mob rule, yet he believed in American independence. In 1775, Morris was elected to New York's Provincial Congress. He was 23 years old. He began to make his mark immediately, drafting reports and resolutions with a clarity and force that caught everyone's attention. Morris was not a military man. He never commanded troops or fought in battles. His battlefield was the legislative chamber, his weapons were words. In 1776, Morris helped draft New York's first state constitution. He argued passionately for religious freedom and against the confiscation of loyalist property. He believed that a new nation must be built on principles, not revenge. But Morris was also pragmatic. He understood that ideals without power were meaningless. He worked tirelessly to organize New York's defenses, to supply Washington's army, to keep the fragile revolutionary government functioning. In 1777, tragedy struck. Morris was riding in a carriage when the horses bolted. He leaped from the carriage to save himself, but his left leg was crushed beneath the wheels. The leg had to be amputated below the knee. Morris was 25 years old. The accident would have destroyed a lesser man, but Morris refused to be diminished by it. He had a wooden leg fitted, and within months he was back at work. He never complained about his disability. He never let it slow him down. If anything, the accident seemed to sharpen his determination. Morris became known for his physical courage, his refusal to accept limitations, his ability to overcome any obstacle. In 1778, Morris was elected to the Continental Congress. He was sent to Philadelphia, where he joined the other delegates struggling to win the war and build a nation. Morris quickly became one of the most important members of Congress. He served on countless committees. He wrote reports on finance, on military affairs, on foreign policy. His pen was always busy. His mind was always working. Morris had a gift for taking complex problems and reducing them to clear, forceful prose. He could see through confusion to the heart of any matter. He could express in a single sentence what others needed paragraphs to explain. Morris worked closely with Robert Morris, no relation, who was the superintendent of finance. Together they struggled to find money to pay the army, to buy supplies, to keep the government solvent. It was exhausting, frustrating work. The states were reluctant to contribute funds. Congress had no power to tax. The currency was worthless. Morris saw firsthand the weakness of the Articles of Confederation, the inability of the national government to act decisively. He became convinced that America needed a stronger central government, a government with real power, or the revolution would be lost. In 1780, Morris lost his seat in Congress. New York politics were treacherous, and Morris had made enemies. He was too outspoken, too independent, too willing to challenge popular opinion. But Morris did not retreat to private life. He moved to Philadelphia and established a successful law practice. He invested in land, in trade, in manufacturing. He became wealthy in his own right, no longer dependent on his family fortune. Morris lived well. He enjoyed fine wine, fine food, fine company. He was a notorious ladies' man, carrying on numerous affairs with married women. He kept detailed journals of his romantic conquests. Morris was charming, witty, sophisticated. Women found him irresistible despite his wooden leg, or perhaps because of it. His disability seemed to add to his appeal, proof of his courage and vitality. But Morris never abandoned public service. In 1787, he was selected as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. That hot summer, 55 delegates gathered to revise the Articles of Confederation. But Morris and others had a more radical plan. They wanted to scrap the Articles entirely and create a new government from scratch. Morris arrived at the convention determined to create a strong national government. He distrusted state sovereignty. He believed that only a powerful central government could hold the nation together, could protect property, could maintain order. Morris spoke more often at the convention than any other delegate. He gave 173 speeches. He dominated the debates with his eloquence, his logic, his vision. Morris argued for a strong executive, for a Senate appointed for life, for property qualifications for voting. He was the most aristocratic of the founders, the most openly skeptical of democracy. He believed that the wealthy and educated should rule, that the masses could not be trusted with power. Yet Morris also argued passionately against slavery. He called it a nefarious institution, the curse of heaven. He warned that slavery would divide the nation and lead to disaster. His speeches against slavery were among the most powerful delivered at the convention. But Morris was also a realist. He knew that the Southern states would never accept a constitution that threatened slavery. He knew that compromises would have to be made. The convention debated through the summer, arguing over representation, over slavery, over the powers of the president and Congress. By September, a draft constitution had been agreed upon, but it was a mess. Different committees had written different sections. The language was inconsistent, unclear, sometimes contradictory. The convention needed someone to take all the pieces and craft them into a coherent whole. The task fell to the Committee of Style, and the dominant member of that committee was Gouverneur Morris. Morris took the draft constitution and rewrote it. He clarified ambiguities. He eliminated redundancies. He polished the prose. Morris gave the Constitution its final form, its clarity, its power. Most importantly, Morris wrote the preamble. The original draft began with a list of the states. Morris swept that away and wrote instead, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." Those 52 words changed everything. Morris shifted the basis of the government from the states to the people. He made the Constitution an act of popular sovereignty, not a compact among states. He gave the document a poetry, a rhythm, a majesty that has resonated through the centuries. We the people. 3 simple words that defined a nation. Morris later said that he had deliberately used ambiguous language in parts of the Constitution, leaving room for interpretation, for growth, for adaptation. He understood that a constitution must be flexible enough to survive changing circumstances. He built into the document the capacity for evolution. On September 17, 1787, the Constitution was signed. Morris did not expect it to last. He thought the compromises over slavery had fatally weakened the document. He predicted that the nation would eventually split apart. But he signed anyway because he believed it was the best that could be achieved. The Constitution was sent to the states for ratification. Morris returned to private life, to his law practice, to his business ventures, to his romantic entanglements. In 1789, George Washington became president under the new Constitution. Morris hoped for an appointment in the new government, but Washington passed him over. Morris's reputation as a womanizer, his aristocratic attitudes, his sharp tongue had made him too controversial. Instead, in 1790, Washington sent Morris to Europe as a private agent to negotiate commercial treaties. Morris spent the next several years in Europe, primarily in France. He arrived just as the French Revolution was beginning. Morris watched with horror as the revolution descended into chaos and terror. Morris kept detailed journals of his time in Paris. He witnessed the fall of the monarchy, the rise of the radicals, the reign of terror. He helped French aristocrats, including the Marquis de Lafayette, escape the guillotine. He smuggled money out of France for refugees. He conducted secret negotiations with the French government, trying to preserve American neutrality. Morris was appointed as the official American minister to France in 1792, but his open sympathy for the French aristocracy made him unpopular with the revolutionary government. He was recalled in 1794. Morris returned to America in 1798 after nearly a decade abroad. He found a nation transformed. Political parties had emerged. The Federalists and the Republicans were locked in bitter conflict. Morris aligned himself with the Federalists, the party of strong central government, of commercial development, of close ties with Britain. In 1800, Morris was elected to the United States Senate from New York. He served one term, from 1800 to 1803. He was a fierce opponent of Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans. He fought against the Louisiana Purchase, arguing that it would dilute the power of the original states. He opposed the admission of new Western states, fearing they would be dominated by slaveholders. Morris's Senate career was not distinguished. He was too rigid, too pessimistic, too willing to predict disaster. The world was changing and Morris could not change with it. He lost his Senate seat in 1803 and retired to his estate at Mauritania. But Morris remained active. He became obsessed with internal improvements, with canals and roads that would unite the nation commercially. He became the leading advocate for the Erie Canal, the great waterway that would connect the Hudson River to the Great Lakes. Morris spent years promoting the canal, raising money, lobbying the state legislature. When the Erie Canal was finally completed in 1825, 9 years after his death, it was a vindication of his vision. In 1809, at the age of 57, Morris shocked everyone by getting married. His bride was Anne Carey Randolph, known as Nancy, a Virginia woman 35 years younger than Morris. Nancy had been involved in one of the great scandals of the era, accused of murdering her illegitimate child. She had been acquitted, but her reputation was ruined. Morris married her anyway, defying social convention as he had defied it all his life. The marriage was apparently happy. They had one son, Gouverneur Morris Jr., born when Morris was 61. Morris spent his final years at Mauritania, managing his estate, writing letters, receiving visitors. He remained interested in public affairs but increasingly disconnected from the political currents of the time. He opposed the War of 1812, believing it was foolish and unnecessary. He attended the Hartford Convention in 1814, where New England Federalists discussed secession from the Union. Morris had come full circle. The man who had written "We the People" now flirted with breaking up the nation he had helped create. On November 6, 1816, Gouverneur Morris died at Mauritania. He was 64 years old. The cause of death was gruesome. Morris had been suffering from a urinary blockage. Unable to bear the pain, he attempted to relieve the blockage himself using a piece of whalebone. He perforated his bladder and died of internal injuries. It was a bizarre, tragic end for a man who had survived so much, who had overcome so many obstacles. Morris left behind a complex legacy. He was brilliant but arrogant, visionary but pessimistic, courageous but cynical. He believed in American independence but doubted American democracy. He wrote the words "We the People" but never fully trusted the people. He fought against slavery but did little to end it. He helped create the Constitution but predicted it would fail. Morris was a man of his time and yet ahead of his time, a founder who shaped the nation but never fully understood what he had created. His words lived on, more powerful and enduring than he ever imagined. The preamble he wrote became the foundation of American identity, the promise that each generation has struggled to fulfill. Gouverneur Morris, the aristocrat who believed in the people, the skeptic who created something lasting, the penman whose words defined a nation. Roger Sherman was a Connecticut statesman and the only founding father to sign all 4 great state papers of the United States. Roger Sherman, one of America's most influential yet least celebrated founders, was born in Newton, Massachusetts on April 19, 1721. He came from humble beginnings, the son of a farmer and cobbler. Sherman's appearance was unremarkable, his manner plain and direct. Sherman's early years were marked by hardship and self-education. He received little formal schooling, instead teaching himself through borrowed books and almanacs. When his father died in 1741, the 19-year-old Sherman was forced to support his family. He worked as a cobbler like his father before him, but his ambitions reached far beyond the shoemaker's bench. In 1743, Sherman moved to New Milford, Connecticut, following his older brother. Roger Sherman was a self-made man who transformed himself through sheer determination and intellectual curiosity. He studied mathematics, astronomy, and law while working with his hands. Sherman taught himself surveying and became the official surveyor for New Haven County. He published almanacs that demonstrated his mathematical abilities. In 1749, Sherman was admitted to the bar without ever having attended college or studied under a prominent lawyer. Sherman opened a store in New Milford and became a successful merchant. Within a few years, he had established himself as one of the town's leading citizens. In 1749, he married Elizabeth Hartwell. Elizabeth bore him 7 children before her death in 1760. Sherman remarried in 1763 to Rebecca Prescott, who gave him 8 more children. Sherman was a devoted family man who valued education and ensured his children received opportunities he never had. Roger Sherman entered public service in the 1750s when he was elected to various local positions. He served as a justice of the peace, then as a judge of the Court of Common Pleas. Sherman moved to New Haven in 1761, where he continued his legal practice and expanded his business interests. He became treasurer of Yale College, a position that brought him into contact with Connecticut's intellectual elite. Sherman was elected to Connecticut's General Assembly, where he began to build his reputation as a careful, methodical legislator. He was not a brilliant orator or a charismatic leader. Sherman's strength lay in his practical wisdom and his ability to find workable compromises. He spoke plainly and directly, often cutting through elaborate arguments to reach the heart of an issue. His colleagues learned to respect his judgment even when they found his manner unpolished. In the 1760s, as tensions grew between Britain and the American colonies, Sherman emerged as a voice of measured resistance. Connecticut felt the same burdens of taxation without representation that angered colonists throughout America. The Stamp Act of 1765 outraged Americans who saw it as an unconstitutional overreach of British power. Sherman opposed these measures, but he was not among the radical firebrands calling for immediate separation. He was a cautious revolutionary who came to independence through careful reasoning rather than passionate rhetoric. Roger Sherman believed in the rule of law and the rights of Englishmen, and when Britain violated those principles, he reluctantly concluded that separation was necessary. In 1774, Sherman was elected as a delegate to the First Continental Congress. The 53-year-old lawyer and merchant traveled to Philadelphia to join representatives from 12 colonies. Sherman was not well known outside Connecticut, and his plain appearance and blunt manner made little impression on the more sophisticated delegates from Virginia and Massachusetts. But those who listened to him in committee meetings recognized a sharp legal mind and sound political instincts. Sherman served in Congress continuously from 1774 to 1781, one of the most dedicated and hard-working members of that body. In the Second Continental Congress, Sherman participated in the debates over independence. He was not among those who drafted the Declaration of Independence. That task fell to Thomas Jefferson, but Sherman served on the committee of 5 that reviewed and presented the document. On July 4, 1776, Roger Sherman affixed his signature to the Declaration of Independence. Sherman was one of 56 men who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to the cause of American liberty. He understood the gravity of that commitment and the dangers it entailed. During the Revolutionary War, Sherman remained in Congress, working tirelessly on the committees that supplied and supported the Continental Army. He served on the Board of War and the Committee of Foreign Affairs. Sherman's work was unglamorous but essential, dealing with logistics, finances, and administration while others won glory on the battlefield. He helped manage Connecticut's contribution to the war effort, ensuring that troops were raised and supplied. Sherman understood that wars were won not just through battlefield heroics but through careful management of resources and sustained effort over time. In 1777, Sherman signed the Articles of Confederation, becoming one of the few men to sign both the Declaration of Independence and America's first Constitution. The Articles created a loose confederation of states with a weak central government. Sherman supported this structure initially, believing that power should remain primarily with the states. But as the weaknesses of the Articles became apparent during the 1780s, Sherman's views evolved. The new nation struggled with debt, interstate disputes, and the inability to regulate commerce or raise revenue effectively. Roger Sherman recognized that a stronger federal government was necessary to preserve the Union that had been won through so much sacrifice. In May 1787, Sherman traveled to Philadelphia once again, this time as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention. The 66-year-old statesman was one of the oldest delegates present. Sherman participated actively in the debates that shaped the Constitution, speaking more than 100 times during the convention. He was not a political theorist like James Madison or an eloquent speaker like Gouverneur Morris. Sherman was a practical politician who focused on making the Constitution work. The greatest crisis of the convention came over representation in the national legislature. Large states wanted representation based on population, while small states demanded equal representation. The convention deadlocked, and the Union threatened to dissolve before it was properly formed. Roger Sherman proposed the compromise that saved the convention and made the Constitution possible. Sherman's Connecticut Compromise, also called the Great Compromise, created a bicameral legislature with proportional representation in the House and equal representation in the Senate. This solution balanced the interests of large and small states, ensuring that neither could dominate the other. Sherman's proposal was initially rejected but was eventually adopted after weeks of debate and negotiation. It remains one of the fundamental features of American government. Sherman also influenced other aspects of the Constitution, arguing for a single executive rather than a committee, supporting the indirect election of the president through an electoral college, and advocating for the protection of state sovereignty within the federal system. On September 17, 1787, Roger Sherman signed the Constitution of the United States, becoming the only person to have signed both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Sherman returned to Connecticut to support ratification of the Constitution. He wrote essays defending the document and spoke at the state ratifying convention. Connecticut ratified the Constitution in January 1788, becoming the fifth state to do so. Sherman's influence and reputation in his home state proved crucial to securing this early approval. In 1789, Roger Sherman was elected to the first United States House of Representatives. The 68-year-old congressman traveled to New York City, the nation's temporary capital, to help launch the new government. Sherman served in the House during the crucial First Congress that established the framework for the new federal system. He supported the Bill of Rights, though he had initially believed such amendments were unnecessary since the Constitution granted the federal government only limited powers. Sherman argued that the amendments should restrict only the federal government, not the states, a position that prevailed and shaped American constitutional law for over a century. Sherman helped establish the federal judiciary, create executive departments, and set up the nation's financial system under Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton. He worked on the assumption of state debts and the creation of a national bank. Sherman generally supported Hamilton's financial program, though he remained wary of excessive federal power. He believed in a strong but limited national government that could act effectively within its proper sphere while leaving most governance to the states. In 1791, Roger Sherman was elected to the United States Senate, where he served until his death. Senator Sherman continued his pattern of quiet, effective service, working in committees and offering practical advice rather than delivering stirring speeches. He supported the administration of President George Washington and worked to strengthen the institutions of the new government. Sherman understood that the Constitution was only a framework, and that the success of the American experiment depended on the wisdom and restraint of those who govern under it. Roger Sherman never achieved the fame of Washington, Franklin, or Jefferson. He wrote no great state papers, delivered no memorable speeches, and led no armies to victory. Sherman's genius was of a different kind, the genius of practical statesmanship and workable compromise. He had the ability to find common ground between competing interests and to craft solutions that allowed the American system to function. Sherman understood that politics is the art of the possible, and that preserving the Union required flexibility and mutual accommodation. Throughout his career, Sherman maintained his simple lifestyle and unpretentious manner. He never lost touch with his humble origins or forgot that he served the people rather than his own glory. Sherman's personal integrity and dedication to public service earned him the respect of colleagues who might have dismissed him based on his plain appearance and lack of formal education. He proved that in America, a self-educated farmer's son could help shape the destiny of a nation through intelligence, hard work, and sound judgment. In his personal life, Sherman remained devoted to his large family and his Congregationalist faith. He was a deeply religious man who saw divine providence in America's founding and believed that the success of the Republic depended on the virtue of its citizens. Sherman lived modestly despite his success, and he was known for his honesty and frugality. He believed that public officials should set an example of moral rectitude and simple living. On July 23, 1793, Roger Sherman died in New Haven, Connecticut, at the age of 72. He had served his country continuously for nearly 20 years, from the First Continental Congress through his final term in the Senate. Sherman died as he had lived, without fanfare or ostentation, but secure in the knowledge that he had helped build something lasting. His funeral was attended by the leading citizens of Connecticut, and Yale College honored him with memorial services. Sherman left behind a large family and a legacy of public service that his children and grandchildren would continue. Roger Sherman's unique distinction of signing all four founding documents, the Continental Association of 1774, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution, symbolizes his sustained commitment to American independence and union. No other founder can claim this complete record of participation in every stage of America's founding. Sherman was present at the creation, from the first tentative steps toward independence through the establishment of a lasting constitutional government. His contributions may have lacked the brilliance of Madison's theory or the eloquence of Jefferson's prose, but they were no less essential to the success of the American founding. The Connecticut Compromise alone would secure Sherman's place in history, but his influence extended far beyond that single achievement. Sherman helped shape the Constitution in numerous ways, from the structure of the executive branch to the relationship between federal and state governments. He brought to the founding generation a perspective rooted in practical experience rather than abstract theory. Sherman had governed at the local and state level, and he understood how political institutions actually functioned. This practical wisdom proved invaluable in creating a constitution that could work in practice rather than just on paper. Roger Sherman embodied virtues that the founders believed essential to Republican government: integrity, industry, self-discipline, and devotion to the common good. He demonstrated that the American system could elevate men of merit regardless of their birth or education. Sherman's life was a testament to the possibilities of the new nation, showing that talent and character mattered more than wealth or pedigree. In this way, Sherman represented the democratic promise of America even as he helped construct the constitutional framework that would protect and extend that promise to future generations. Today, Roger Sherman remains one of the least known of the major founders, overshadowed by more celebrated contemporaries. But his contributions were fundamental to American independence and constitutional government. Sherman was the steady hand, the voice of practical wisdom, the builder of compromises that made union possible. He was not a man of soaring vision or dramatic gestures, but rather a careful craftsman who helped construct the institutions that have endured for over 2 centuries. Roger Sherman's legacy lives on in the structure of American government, in the balance between state and federal power, and in the example of selfless public service he provided to future generations. He proved that greatness in a republic need not be flashy or dramatic, but can consist of patient, principled work in the service of enduring institutions and the common good. Charles Carroll was a Maryland aristocrat and a devout Catholic who became one of the wealthiest signers of the Declaration of Independence. Charles Carroll of Carrollton, the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence, was born in Annapolis, Maryland on September 19, 1737. He came from one of the most prosperous families in colonial America. He had an aristocratic demeanor. Carroll's land holdings were vast, stretching across thousands of acres. He was educated at home by private tutors until the age of 8, when he was sent abroad for his education. Then in 1748, young Charles sailed to France to attend Jesuit schools, beginning an educational journey that would last nearly 2 decades. Charles Carroll was raised in the Catholic faith at a time when Catholics faced severe restrictions in Maryland and throughout the American colonies. In 1757, Carroll moved to London to study law at the Inner Temple. He immersed himself in legal studies and the Enlightenment philosophy that was sweeping through Europe. The young scholar absorbed the ideas of liberty, natural rights, and representative government. After completing his legal education in 1764, the 27-year-old Carroll returned to Maryland, one of the most educated men in the colonies. His father, Charles Carroll of Annapolis, was among the wealthiest men in America, and young Charles stood to inherit an enormous fortune. Carroll returned to a colony where Catholics could not vote, hold office, or practice law publicly. Despite his extensive legal training, he could not pursue a legal career because of his religion. In 1768, Carroll married his cousin Mary Donnell, known as Molly. The marriage strengthened the family's already considerable wealth and social position. Carroll settled into managing the vast family estates, which included ironworks, mills, and thousands of acres worked by enslaved people. Charles Carroll was a slave owner who held hundreds of enslaved individuals across his properties throughout his lifetime. He managed his estates with the same careful attention he brought to his studies, keeping meticulous records and constantly seeking to expand his holdings. Carroll became one of the wealthiest men in America, with assets that would be worth hundreds of millions in today's currency. In 1773, Carroll entered the public arena through a newspaper debate that would make him famous throughout Maryland. Writing under the pseudonym First Citizen, he engaged in a heated exchange with the colonial governor's supporter over taxation and representation. Carroll argued brilliantly against arbitrary taxation and for the rights of colonists. The First Citizen letters revealed a sharp legal mind and a passionate advocate for colonial rights. Though everyone soon knew the author's identity, Carroll's eloquence won him widespread admiration. For a Catholic barred from political participation, he had found a powerful voice through the press. The debate transformed Carroll from a wealthy landowner into a political figure, demonstrating that ideas and arguments could overcome legal disabilities. Carroll began to oppose the increasingly oppressive measures Britain was imposing on the colonies. America felt that Britain, its mother country, was exploiting it for taxation and not giving it the freedom that it deserved to chart its own course. Charles Carroll was not initially among the most radical voices calling for independence. He was a cautious man, aware that revolution meant risking everything his family had built over generations. But as tensions escalated, Carroll became convinced that reconciliation with Britain was impossible. His wealth gave him much to lose, but his principles demanded action. In 1774, Carroll was appointed to Maryland's Committee of Correspondence, despite the legal barriers against Catholic participation. The revolutionary crisis was forcing Maryland to set aside its anti-Catholic laws. Carroll's abilities were too valuable to ignore. In 1776, the Continental Congress sent Carroll on a critical diplomatic mission to Canada. Joined by Benjamin Franklin and Samuel Chase, Carroll was tasked with persuading French-speaking Catholics in Quebec to join the American cause. The mission included Carroll's cousin, Father John Carroll, who would later become America's first Catholic bishop. The Canadian mission ultimately failed, as the Quebecois chose to remain neutral, but it demonstrated the trust revolutionary leaders placed in Charles Carroll. In June 1776, Maryland finally authorized its delegates to vote for independence. Carroll was elected to the Continental Congress, arriving in Philadelphia in July. He had missed the July 2 vote for independence, but he was present when the engrossed declaration was ready for signing. On August 2, 1776, Charles Carroll stepped forward to sign the Declaration of Independence. According to legend, when Carroll signed, someone remarked that he would not be easily identified since there were other Charles Carrolls. In response, Carroll added of Carrollton to his signature, clearly identifying himself and his estate. It was a bold gesture, marking himself unmistakably for British retaliation. Carroll was literally signing away his fortune, his lands, potentially his life. Charles Carroll was risking more than most signers in terms of sheer wealth. His property holdings made him perhaps the wealthiest man to sign the Declaration. But he never wavered in his commitment to American independence. Carroll served in the Continental Congress through some of the darkest days of the Revolutionary War. He worked on committees managing the war effort, dealing with finance, and organizing military supplies. The war years tested everyone's resolve. Carroll used his own fortune to support the cause, purchasing supplies and lending money to the struggling government. In 1777, Carroll returned to Maryland to serve in the state Senate, a position he would hold for many years. He worked to establish Maryland's new government under its constitution. Carroll helped manage Maryland's contribution to the war effort, ensuring troops were supplied and the state met its obligations to the Continental Congress. The war dragged on, year after difficult year. British forces threatened Maryland multiple times. Carroll's estates were vulnerable to British raids, his fortune at constant risk. Yet he remained steadfast in supporting independence. When the British surrender came at Yorktown in 1781, Carroll was among those who had sacrificed greatly for victory. In 1783, with the war over, Carroll faced the challenge of rebuilding. His estates had suffered from years of war disruption. The new nation faced enormous debts and economic uncertainty. But America was independent, and Carroll had helped make it so. He continued serving in Maryland Senate, working to establish stable government in the new state. In 1788, Carroll supported ratification of the new federal constitution. He believed a strong central government was necessary for the nation's survival. Maryland ratified the Constitution, and Carroll was elected as one of Maryland's first United States senators. In 1789, Charles Carroll took his seat in the first United States Senate. He served alongside other founders, helping to establish the procedures and precedents of the new government. Carroll supported the financial programs of Alexander Hamilton, believing sound finance was essential for national success. He voted to establish the National Bank and to assume state debts from the Revolutionary War. Carroll served only 2 years in the Senate before resigning in 1792 to return to Maryland State Senate. He preferred state politics and managing his estates to life in the temporary national capital. Carroll remained active in Maryland politics for many more years, serving in the state Senate until 1800. He was a Federalist, supporting strong government and commercial development. Carroll invested in numerous ventures to develop Maryland and the new nation. He was a major investor in the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, America's first commercial railroad. In his 80s, Carroll participated in the groundbreaking ceremony for the railroad in 1828. As the years passed, the other signers of the Declaration died, one by one. Carroll watched his fellow founders pass away, carrying the memory of that momentous summer of 1776. By the 1820s, Carroll was the last living signer of the Declaration of Independence. He became a living link to the founding, revered as a patriarch of the Revolution. Visitors came to Carrollton to meet the last signer. Carroll received them graciously, sharing memories of the founding era. He corresponded with younger generations, offering his perspective on the nation's development. Carroll witnessed enormous changes in America during his long life. The nation grew from 13 colonies to 24 states. The population exploded westward. Democracy expanded, though not to everyone. Carroll had complicated views on slavery throughout his life. He recognized slavery as morally wrong and occasionally spoke of gradual emancipation. Yet he never freed his slaves during his lifetime. He continued to profit from enslaved labor until his death. This contradiction marked many of the founders, including Carroll. They proclaimed liberty while denying it to hundreds of thousands. Carroll remained a devout Catholic throughout his life, living to see many restrictions on Catholics lifted. The religious freedom guaranteed by the Constitution that Carroll supported allowed Catholics to participate fully in American life. His cousin John Carroll became the first Catholic bishop in America, establishing the church's hierarchy in the new nation. Charles Carroll's success and prominence helped demonstrate that Catholics could be loyal, productive American citizens. His example helped break down centuries of prejudice. In his final years, Carroll lived quietly at his estates, surrounded by family. He had 7 children with his wife Molly, who died in 1782. 3 of his children survived to adulthood. Carroll's son Charles Carroll Jr. predeceased him, dying in 1825. The loss devastated the elderly patriarch. Carroll's daughters and grandchildren cared for him in his final years. He remained mentally sharp, corresponding about politics and current events into his 90s. On November 14, 1832, Charles Carroll died at his daughter's home in Baltimore. He was 95 years old, having outlived all other signers of the Declaration by more than 6 years. His death marked the end of an era, closing the generation of the founders. News of Carroll's death spread throughout the nation. Cities held memorial services honoring the last signer. Newspapers published tributes celebrating his life and service. Carroll was buried at his family chapel in Baltimore, laid to rest with the Catholic rites he had practiced faithfully throughout his life. Charles Carroll's legacy is complex and multifaceted. He was a champion of liberty who owned slaves. He was a Catholic in a Protestant nation who helped establish religious freedom. He was an aristocrat who supported Republican government. He risked the largest fortune in America for independence. Carroll represented both the ideals and contradictions of the founding generation. His wealth came partly from enslaved labor, yet he used that wealth to support American independence. He believed in liberty and natural rights, yet failed to extend those rights to the people he enslaved. Carroll's life spanned nearly a century of American history, from colonial times through the early republic. He witnessed the birth of the nation and its growth into a continental power. His signature on the Declaration of Independence, clearly marked of Carrollton, proclaimed his commitment to American independence. That signature represented a willingness to risk everything for the cause of liberty. Carroll understood that signing the Declaration meant possible execution for treason. He signed anyway, adding his estate's name to make his identity unmistakable. Charles Carroll of Carrollton lived longer than any other signer, becoming the last living link to that momentous decision in Philadelphia. His longevity allowed him to see the results of independence, the establishment of constitutional government, and the expansion of the nation. He saw democracy take root and flourish, though imperfectly. Carroll's life demonstrated that American identity could encompass religious diversity, that Catholics could be patriots and founders. His prominence helped establish religious pluralism as an American value. The contradictions in Carroll's life reflect the contradictions in America's founding. The nation proclaimed that all men are created equal while permitting slavery. It championed liberty while restricting rights based on religion, race, and gender. Carroll embodied these contradictions, proclaiming freedom while denying it to others. Yet his contributions to independence and his willingness to risk everything for American liberty remain significant. Charles Carroll was even in death a symbol of the founding generation, the last surviving signer who carried the memory of independence into the age of Andrew Jackson. Nathanael Greene was a self-educated Quaker from Rhode Island who became one of America's greatest military strategists and George Washington's most trusted general. Nathanael Greene, the brilliant tactician of the Revolutionary War, was born in Potawatomi, Rhode Island on August 7, 1742. He came from a devout Quaker family. He had a pronounced limp from childhood. Greene's father owned an iron foundry and several mills. He was largely self-taught, reading military history and strategy by candlelight. Then in 1770, his father died and the 28-year-old Greene took over the family business, expanding their operations throughout Rhode Island. Nathanael Greene was a man who defied his pacifist upbringing. He was expelled from the Quaker meeting house for attending a military parade. In 1774, when tensions with Britain escalated in the American colonies, Greene, a successful businessman in Coventry, helped form a local militia company called the Kentish Guards. Greene studied military tactics obsessively. He devoured every book on warfare he could find. When the Continental Army formed, he was eager to serve despite his physical disability. He was passed over for officer rank in his militia unit because of his limp. He was disappointed by that rejection but remained undeterred. In 1775, Greene left his business and traveled to the siege of Boston. Within months he married Catherine Littlefield, called Katie. Katie, along with her vivacious personality, made him one of the most socially connected officers in the Continental Army. Greene was appointed Brigadier General in the Continental Army. He began to impress George Washington with his keen understanding of military logistics and strategy. America felt that Britain, its mother country, was exploiting it for taxation and not giving it the freedom that it deserved to chart its own course. Nathanael Greene was not a firebrand revolutionary at first. He was a thoughtful convert who came to believe independence was necessary through careful reasoning and study. In June 1775, Greene was commissioned as a general in the Continental Army. 1 month later, he took command of Rhode Island troops at the Siege of Boston. Greene was literally the young general who rode alongside Washington, learning the art of command from the commander-in-chief himself. In March 1776, Greene's forces helped secure the American victory at Boston when the British evacuated the city. Washington moved his army to New York City, and Greene commanded forces in the defense of Long Island. But within months, Greene fell seriously ill with fever and missed the disastrous Battle of Long Island. Nathanael Greene recovered quickly and rejoined the army. He participated in the retreat through New Jersey. He always remained loyal to Washington even when other generals questioned the commander's decisions. On Christmas night 1776, Greene commanded a division in Washington's daring attack across the Delaware River. Nathanael Greene was a bold tactician when he led his troops through the frozen roads of New Jersey. He understood that surprise and mobility were essential to defeating the superior British forces. Greene's division fought brilliantly in the victories at Trenton and Princeton. But following those victories was a long, harsh winter for the Continental Army. Valley Forge tested every soldier's resolve. That cold, bleak winter they endured unimaginable hardships. Greene's leadership was all about maintaining morale and keeping the army together for another day. In 1778, Washington appointed Greene as Quartermaster General of the Continental Army. Greene was reluctant to accept this administrative position. He wanted to lead troops in battle, not manage supplies and logistics. But Washington convinced him that the army's survival depended on proper supply lines. Greene transformed the chaotic supply system into an efficient operation. He established depots, organized transportation, and ensured troops received food and equipment. Greene's genius for logistics kept the Continental Army functioning when it might have collapsed. He often used his own credit to purchase supplies when Congress failed to provide funds. In 1780, a major crisis erupted in the southern colonies. British forces under General Cornwallis had captured Charleston and were sweeping through the Carolinas. The American commander in the South, Horatio Gates, suffered a catastrophic defeat at Camden. Washington needed his best general to save the Southern campaign. He turned to Nathanael Greene. In October 1780, Greene was appointed commander of the Southern Department. He resigned as Quartermaster General despite the financial complications. When Greene arrived in Charlotte, North Carolina, he found an army in shambles. His force numbered fewer than 1,500 men, most poorly equipped and demoralized. The southern colonies seemed lost to the British cause. But Greene had a plan. Greene understood that he could not defeat Cornwallis in a conventional battle. His army was too small and too weak. Instead, he would use unconventional tactics. He would divide his forces, harass British supply lines, and exhaust the enemy through constant movement. Greene made a daring decision that contradicted all military wisdom. He split his already small army into 2 divisions. He sent Daniel Morgan with 600 men to western South Carolina. Greene took the remainder south to the P.D. River. Military theorists said this was madness, dividing forces in the face of a superior enemy. But Greene knew the geography of the South. He understood that Cornwallis would have to divide his own forces to pursue both American armies. This would stretch British supply lines and create opportunities for American victories. In January 1781, Morgan won a stunning victory at the Battle of Cowpens. Using double envelopment tactics, Morgan destroyed a British force under Banastre Tarleton. This victory validated Greene's strategy. Cornwallis was furious and determined to catch Morgan's army. Greene now faced his greatest challenge. He had to reunite his divided forces before Cornwallis could destroy them separately. What followed was one of the most remarkable military campaigns in American history. Greene led Cornwallis on a chase through the Carolinas that became known as the Race to the Dan. For weeks, Greene's army stayed just ahead of the pursuing British. They marched through winter rain and crossed swollen rivers. Greene personally scouted routes and organized river crossings. His attention to logistics and planning saved the army. The Americans reached the Dan River in Virginia just hours ahead of the British. Greene had boats waiting on the north bank. His entire army crossed to safety while Cornwallis watched from the opposite shore. The British general had been outmaneuvered. Cornwallis had marched his army to exhaustion chasing the Americans. He had burned his own supply wagons to move faster. Now he was deep in hostile territory with no supplies and an exhausted army. Greene had won without fighting a major battle. But Greene was not finished. Once his army rested and received reinforcements, he recrossed the Dan River. Now he would take the offensive. In March 1781, Greene fought Cornwallis at Guilford Courthouse in North Carolina. The battle was fierce and bloody. Greene's militia fought bravely before retreating. His Continental regulars held firm against British bayonet charges. Technically, Cornwallis held the field at the end of the day. But the British victory was Pyrrhic. Cornwallis lost over 500 men, nearly a quarter of his army. Greene's losses were lighter, and he withdrew in good order. A British politician later said of Guilford Courthouse that another such victory would destroy the British army. Cornwallis was forced to retreat to the coast to resupply and receive reinforcements. Greene had achieved his strategic objective. The British abandoned the Carolina interior. Greene now turned his attention to the British outposts scattered across South Carolina and Georgia. Over the next several months, Greene fought a series of battles at Hobkirk's Hill, 96, and Eutaw Springs. Greene lost most of these tactical battles. British forces held the field when fighting ended. But Greene won the strategic campaign. After each battle, British forces retreated to their coastal strongholds. Greene recaptured the interior of the southern colonies. American forces liberated town after town. By the fall of 1781, the British controlled only Charleston and Savannah. Greene had reconquered the South without winning a major battle. His strategy of exhaustion and maneuver had succeeded brilliantly. When Cornwallis moved north into Virginia, he marched into the trap that ended at Yorktown. Greene's southern campaign had made that final victory possible. Washington and the French fleet defeated Cornwallis while Greene secured the Carolinas and Georgia. In 1783, with the war over, Greene faced financial ruin. He had used his personal credit extensively to supply his army. Congress had promised to reimburse him but was slow to pay. Greene was owed thousands of pounds. He had sacrificed his fortune for his country. The state of Georgia granted Greene a confiscated Loyalist plantation called Mulberry Grove as thanks for his service. Greene moved his family south to start a new life. He hoped to restore his finances through planting. On June 19, 1786, Nathaniel Greene died suddenly at Mulberry Grove. He was only 43 years old. The cause was likely heat stroke suffered while inspecting his fields. His death shocked the nation. Greene left his family in difficult financial circumstances. Katie Greene struggled for years to settle his debts and secure compensation from Congress. Eventually, Congress granted her money in recognition of her husband's service. Nathaniel Greene never achieved the fame of George Washington. But military historians recognize him as one of America's greatest generals. His Southern campaign is studied as a masterpiece of strategic warfare. Greene understood that wars are not always won through battlefield victories. Sometimes the goal is simply to survive, to exhaust the enemy, to make occupation too costly to maintain. Greene pioneered the use of mobility and logistics as weapons. He understood that an army that can move faster and supply itself better can defeat a stronger force. His tactics influenced later American military doctrine. Greene's relationship with Washington was crucial to American independence. Washington trusted Greene more than any other general. When the southern colonies seemed lost, Washington knew Greene could save them. Greene justified that faith through brilliant generalship. He was a self-taught military genius who rose from humble Quaker origins to command armies. He overcame physical disability and lack of formal training through determination and study. Greene represented the American ideal that talent and hard work matter more than birth and privilege. After his death, monuments were erected to honor Nathanael Greene. Counties and cities across America bear his name. Fort Greene in Brooklyn commemorates his defense of New York. Greene County in multiple states honors his memory. But perhaps his greatest monument is the nation he helped create. Without Greene's Southern campaign, American independence might have failed. The British might have held the Carolinas and Georgia. The war might have ended in stalemate rather than American victory. Greene's grave was lost for decades after his death. In the 19th century, his remains were rediscovered and reinterred in Johnson Square in Savannah, Georgia. A monument marks the spot where one of America's greatest generals rests. Nathanael Greene was even in death the forgotten hero who deserved to be remembered alongside the most celebrated founders of the American Republic.